My name is Delilah, and on my 29th birthday, my husband raised his champagne glass in front of everyone who mattered in his world and called me his most successful failure. The room erupted in laughter while I sat there in my designer dress, the one he'd chosen, of course, smiling like the perfect corporate wife I'd trained myself to be. For 5 years, Daniel and his family had treated me like an expensive disappointment, a practice wife, someone whose father was just a strip mall accountant and whose dreams of investing were cute little hobbies. But as he finished his cruel toast that October night, he had no idea that the envelope I was about to slide across that candlelit table contained documents that would destroy his family's empire in exactly 48 hours. Sometimes the person you dismiss at the dinner table is secretly buying your chair out from under you. But before we move back to it, comment down your age and where you're watching from, and if this story resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about deception, betrayal, and finding the strength to reclaim your life. The morning light filtered through the gauze curtains of our bedroom, painting golden stripes across the Italian marble floor that Daniel had insisted we needed. I'd been awake for 20 minutes already, listening to the sound of his breathing, waiting for him to stir. Today was my 29th birthday, and some childish part of me still hoped he'd remembered, that he'd wake up with that boyish grin he used to wear when we first met, pull me close, and whisper something sweet against my ear. Instead, the alarm on his phone erupted at 6:30 sharp, and Daniel rolled out of bed without even glancing my way. I watched him pad across the room to his walk-in closet, his movements efficient and purposeful, like a man with somewhere important to be. The muscles in his back flexed as he pulled on his running gear. The same routine every morning, as predictable as the stock market reports he'd listened to through his AirPods. "Morning," I ventured, sitting up against the headboard. "Morning, Delilah." He didn't turn around. "I've got that Peterson meeting at 9, so I'll shower at the gym. Don't wait up for dinner either, networking thing at the club." The words hung in the air between us, unremarkable in their coldness. I waited a beat, then two, hoping he'd remember. Nothing. He grabbed his water bottle and headed for the door, then paused. For a moment, my heart lifted. "Oh," he said, snapping his fingers. "Happy birthday. There's something on the kitchen counter for you." And then he was gone, the echo of his footsteps on the stairs fading into silence. I found his gift easily enough, a hastily scrawled note on his monogrammed stationery. "Happy birthday, D. Dinner reservations at Le Bernardin, 8 p.m. Invite whoever." Daniel, the credit card he'd given me for household expenses, lay beside it, its silver surface catching the morning light. I traced my finger over the embossed letters of his name. Even the card I used bore his identity, not mine. The breakfast with his parents had been scheduled weeks ago, one of those mandatory family gatherings that appeared on our shared calendar like dental appointments. The Whitmore estate sprawled across 3 acres in Westchester, all manicured hedges and old money pretension. Daniel's mother, Catherine, greeted me at the door with her usual air kiss that never quite touched my cheek. "Delilah, darling," she said, her eyes doing that quick inventory they always did, scanning my outfit, my jewelry, my posture, tallying up my worth like items on a balance sheet. "That dress is interesting. Where did you find it?" "It's vintage Halston," I replied, smoothing the emerald silk. "From my mother's collection." "How sentimental." The word dripped with subtle disdain. Though I suppose when one doesn't have the means for current fashion, vintage can be quite practical. I bit the inside of my cheek, a trick I'd learned to keep my expression neutral. What Catherine didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd purchased that exact dress at a Sotheby's auction last month for $12,000. But I'd learned long ago that correcting the Whitmore's assumptions about my finances only led to more probing questions. Thomas Whitmore held court at the breakfast table, his Wall Street Journal folded precisely beside his plate. He barely looked up when I entered, just grunted his acknowledgement, and continued lecturing Daniel about market volatility and the softness of the younger generation. "The problem with young people today," he said, cutting into his Eggs Benedict with surgical precision, "is they think success should be handed to them. They don't understand that real wealth, real power, comes from grinding your opponents into dust." His eyes flicked to me. "No offense, Delilah, But women especially seem to think they can play in the big leagues without understanding the rules. None taken, I murmured, sipping my coffee. Black, no sugar. Catherine had once commented that cream and sugar were for people who couldn't afford good coffee, and I'd adapted accordingly. Daniel laughed, that sharp bark he developed since joining his father's firm. Delilah's been talking about taking some investment courses, he said, his tone making it sound like I'd suggested taking up finger painting. I told her to stick to her little hobbies. Maybe interior design or something more suitable. Very wise. Thomas nodded approvingly. A woman's worth is in what she brings to the table: beauty, grace, the ability to host. Leave the real business to those equipped for it. Catherine smiled her razor smile.
Exactly.
I've always said that the best investment a woman can make is in a good husband. Everything else is just playing dress up. I set my fork down carefully, the silver barely making a sound against the china. Actually, I've been doing quite well with my portfolio. The biotech positions I took last quarter are up 30%. The table went quiet. Daniel's face darkened. I'd broken the unspoken rule about discussing my personal finances. His family exchanged glances, the kind that said they were humoring me. How ambitious, Catherine finally said. Though I'm sure Daniel helps you with the real decisions. Men just have a natural instinct for these things. I wanted to tell her that my natural instinct had turned my father's modest life insurance payout into a 7-figure portfolio. That while Daniel was losing money on flashy ventures as golf buddies recommended, I'd been quietly building positions in companies that were about to explode. That the little hobby they mocked had made me financially independent 3 times over. Instead, I smiled and said, "Of course. Daniel's guidance is invaluable." Daniel reached over and squeezed my shoulder, not affectionately, but possessively, the way you might grip a dog's collar to keep it from barking. That's my girl. Knows her place. The rest of the breakfast passed in a blur of casual cruelties. Catherine mentioned how tired I looked, suggesting perhaps I should take better care of myself. Thomas made 3 separate comments about the importance of providing grandchildren before the clock runs out. Daniel's sister, Victoria, arrived late and immediately launched into a story about her friend's divorce, emphasizing how the wife had gotten greedy and ended up with nothing. As we were leaving, I overheard Thomas pull Daniel aside in the foyer. He didn't bother lowering his voice. Why would he?
I was just furniture to them.
The birthday dinner tonight, Thomas said. You're using it for the Morrison deal, right? Get him liquored up. Charm his wife. Already arranged, Daniel confirmed. Delilah won't even notice. She'll be too busy playing hostess. Good. And son? Maybe it's time to think about restructuring your personal situation. The prenup is ironclad, and frankly, you could do better. The Morrison girl is single, and her father owns half of Manhattan. Daniel's pause was brief. One thing at a time, Dad. Let me close this deal first. I slipped out to the car, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. In my purse, my phone buzzed with a notification from my broker. Another position had closed successfully. A small pharmaceutical company I'd researched for months had just gotten FDA approval. The profit would be enough to buy the Whitmore estate twice over. But they didn't need to know that. Not yet. The afternoon passed in a haze of preparations. Daniel had texted me a list of must-invite guests for the dinner. Notably missing were any of my actual friends. Instead, it was his business partners, his college buddies, his parents, and a handful of clients he was courting. My birthday had become another networking opportunity, another stage for the Daniel Whitmore show. I dressed carefully for the dinner, choosing a black cocktail dress that was elegant but understated. Anything too striking would earn Catherine's disapproval. Too plain would embarrass Daniel. The diamond earrings he'd given me for our anniversary caught the light as I turned my head, examining myself in the mirror. Beautiful, expensive, and ultimately meaningless, rather like our marriage had become. The car arrived at 7:30, and I slid into the back seat with my purse clutched carefully in my lap. Inside, tucked between my lipstick and compact, was an envelope that had arrived by courier that morning. Legal documents, dense with legalese, bearing official seals and notarized signatures. My lawyer had outdone herself. Everything was perfectly, devastatingly legitimate. Le Bernardin was glowing with warm light when we arrived, its Michelin stars practically visible in the air of superiority that surrounded the place. Daniel was already there, holding court at a table for 20, his voice carrying across the dining room as he regaled his audience with some story about crushing a competitor. "There she is," he announced as I approached, not standing to greet me. The birthday girl, fashionably late as always. "Traffic," I murmured, though I'd actually been sitting in the car for 5 minutes, gathering my courage. The table was a who's who of Daniel's world. Chuck Morrison sat to his right, the real estate mogul whose deal Daniel was so desperate to close. His wife, a nervous woman who laughed too loud at every joke, kept refilling her wineglass with shaking hands. Daniel's business partners, Marcus and James, were already 3 drinks in, their voices growing louder with each round. "Delilah," Marcus slurred slightly, raising his glass. "The silent partner in the Whitmore empire. Tell me, what's it like being married to this bastard?" "Educational," I replied, taking my seat. The only empty chair was at the far end of the table, as far from Daniel as possible. "Of course. She's learning her place," Daniel said, and the men laughed. "Took some training, but she's almost housebroken." More laughter. I smiled, the expression feeling like broken glass in my mouth. The dinner progressed with painful predictability. Daniel dominated every conversation, his voice growing more bombastic with each drink. His parents arrived fashionably late, Catherine making a show of air-kissing everyone while commenting on the quaint restaurant choice. Thomas immediately began grilling Chuck Morrison about his latest development project. "You know," Chuck said, gesturing with his fork, "I admire what you've built here, Whitmore. A man needs a strong foundation, good family, obedient wife, loyal partners. That's real success." "Here, here," James chimed in. "Though between us, I don't know how you managed to train this one." He pointed at me with his butter knife. "My wife read some feminist blog, and now she thinks she should have opinions about my portfolio." "The key," Daniel said, his eyes finding mine across the table, "is to remind them regularly who holds the power. Financial, social, even emotional. Keep them dependent, and they'll never leave." "Even if they wanted to," Thomas added with a dark chuckle. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment to breathe. In the mirror, I looked exactly like what they saw, a pretty accessory, expensively dressed but ultimately worthless beyond decoration. The woman staring back at me had hollow eyes and a practiced smile. But behind that facade, I felt the weight of the envelope in my purse like a loaded gun. When I returned to the table, our entrees had arrived. Daniel was mid-story, something about a hostile takeover he'd orchestrated. And the best part, he was saying, was the look on his face when he realized I'd bought up all his debt. One phone call to the banks, and his whole life crumbled. That's real power, holding someone's future in your hands and choosing to crush it. "Brutal," Chuck approved. "That's why I want you on this Morrison deal. You've got the killer instinct." Catherine leaned toward Victoria, her stage whisper deliberately audible. "This is why breeding matters, darling. You can't teach this kind of strength, it's inherited." "Unlike some qualities," Victoria replied, looking directly at me. "Desperation, for instance. You can smell it across a room." The waiter appeared at my elbow, refilling my water glass. As he leaned in, he whispered, "The scholarship program you funded changed my daughter's life, Mrs. Whitmore." "Thank you." I blinked, startled. I'd been so careful to keep my charitable giving anonymous. "I think you're mistaken." "No mistake," he said quietly. "The foundation told us who our angel was. My daughter starts medical school next month because of you." Daniel's voice cut across the moment. "What's the help bothering you about, Delilah? This is a Michelin restaurant, not a charity case." "Just thanking me for the recommendation I gave his daughter." I lied smoothly. "For university." "How middle-class of you," Catherine sniffed. "Really, Delilah, we must discuss appropriate boundaries with the help." The dessert course was being prepared when Daniel stood, his champagne glass catching the light. The conversation died down as he tapped his ring against the crystal, the sharp sound cutting through the restaurant's ambient noise. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying that particular tone of self-satisfaction that I'd grown to despise. "I'd like to propose a toast." The table turned toward him expectantly. Chuck Morrison pulled out his phone to record. Apparently, Daniel's toasts were legendary in their circles. I felt my stomach tighten, some primitive instinct warning me of danger. "Today," Daniel continued, "we celebrate my wife's birthday. 29 years old, though she'll probably claim 25. Polite laughter rippled around the table. I maintained my smile. When I met Delilah 5 years ago, she was, how should I put this? Raw material. Unformed. A girl from nowhere special, with nothing special to offer except a pretty face and a desperate need to matter. The laughter grew uncomfortable. A few people glanced at me, then away. I kept my eyes on Daniel, my expression carefully neutral. "But I saw potential," he went on, warming to his theme. "The same way a sculptor sees a statue in a block of marble. It just needs someone with vision and the right tools to chip away everything that doesn't belong." Thomas raised his glass in approval. "Well said, son." 5 years of marriage, Daniel continued, and I'm proud to say she's become exactly what I envisioned. The perfect corporate wife, beautiful, silent, and just smart enough to know her place, but not smart enough to question it. Marcus barked out a laugh. "Harsh, Whitmore." "Honest," Daniel corrected. "You see, Delilah came to this marriage with nothing. No family money, no connections, no real education worth mentioning. Her father was what, an accountant? The kind who does taxes at a strip mall? And her mother sold department store makeup. Hardly the pedigree we're accustomed to." Each word was a calculated cut, designed to humiliate. The other diners at nearby tables were starting to notice, their conversations trailing off as Daniel's voice grew louder. "But I'm a generous man," he continued. "I gave her everything, this lifestyle, these clothes, access to our circles. And what has she done with it? Played at being an investor with her little Robinhood account. Pretended to understand business when she can barely balance a checkbook. It's actually endearing, in a pathetic sort of way." "Daniel," Chuck Morrison said quietly, "maybe ease up." No, Daniel waved him off. "She needs to hear this. It's for her own good. You see, Delilah has this fantasy that she's more than what she is. She thinks those online courses she takes mean something. She thinks managing her little trust fund from Daddy's life insurance makes her Gordon Gekko. But the truth is..." He paused for effect, his eyes finding mine across the table. "The truth is, she's my most successful failure. I've spent 5 years trying to make something of her, and all I've managed to create is a very expensive disappointment. So here's to you, darling." He raised his glass high. "To my little project, still unfinished, still a failure, but at least decorative enough to justify the investment. Happy birthday, Delilah. May this year bring you the self-awareness to finally understand what you really are, nothing without me." The silence that followed was deafening. Even his parents looked uncomfortable, though Catherine recovered quickly, raising her glass with a tight smile. One by one, the others followed suit, the clink of crystal against crystal sounding like breaking bones. I stood slowly, my own glass in hand. The envelope in my purse seemed to pulse with possibility. "That was quite a speech," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I have something for you too, Daniel. A birthday gift, you might say." I pulled the envelope from my purse and slid it across the table. It moved through the candlelight like a shark through water, coming to rest in front of him. "Open it when you're done laughing," I said. Daniel smirked, the expression I'd once found charming now revealing itself as cruel. "What's this? Divorce papers? How dramatic." He tossed the envelope aside without opening it, playing to his audience. "She threatens this every few months. Part of the show." His friends chuckled, the tension breaking slightly. James reached for the wine bottle. Women and their dramatics, right? I sat back down, cutting a small piece of my untouched dessert. The chocolate soufflé was perfect, rich and dark. I savored it while Daniel continued his performance, regaling the table with stories of my various failures. The time I'd suggested a different investment strategy that he'd ignored, the charity gala I'd organized that he'd taken credit for, the business connections I'd made that he'd claimed as his own. Remember when she thought she understood cryptocurrency? He laughed. Wanted to invest our money in Bitcoin when it was at 20,000. Thank God I stopped her. It crashed to 3,000 right after. She would have ruined us. I didn't mention that I'd bought it at 3,000 with my own money and sold at 60,000. Or that the profit from that trade alone could buy his parents' house. Catherine leaned forward, her voice carrying despite its low volume. You know, Delilah, we've been very patient with you. Very accommodating. But Daniel's future requires a certain type of partner. Someone who enhances his position, not drags it down. Someone with breeding, Victoria added. Real family history. Not someone who had to Google which fork to use at her first formal dinner. The memory flashed unbidden, my father teaching me about formal place settings when I was 7, using paper plates and plastic utensils in our tiny kitchen. The rich aren't better than us, Lila, he'd said. They just have more elaborate ways of being cruel. Thomas cleared his throat. What Catherine is trying to say is that we've been discussing the future. Daniel's future. And while you've been adequate as a starter wife, it's time to think about upgrades. The Morrison girl, Chuck offered helpfully, apparently unbothered by discussing my replacement in front of me. Harvard MBA, father owns half of Manhattan, and she's already expressed interest. She's also barren, I said conversationally, taking another bite of souffle. Botched abortion in college. Her father paid a fortune to keep it quiet, but medical records have a way of surfacing. The table went silent. Chuck's face went purple. How dare you? Oh, did I overstep? I asked innocently. I thought we were sharing intimate details about people's lives without their consent. My mistake. Daniel's face had gone from smug to furious. Apologize. Now. To whom? Chuck, for telling the truth? You for embarrassing you? Or myself, for sitting here for 2 hours while you all discussed me like I was furniture you were thinking of reupholstering? I stood again, this time pulling on my coat. The envelope contained some interesting reading, Daniel. Documents showing that I own 53% of your family's company through various holdings. Foreclosure notices for your parents' house. Did you know they're 4 months behind on their mortgage? And my personal favorite, the forensic accounting report showing how you've been embezzling from your own investors to maintain this lifestyle. You're lying, Thomas snarled. The beautiful thing about legal documents, I said, adjusting my purse strap, is that they don't lie. Unlike everyone at this table. I looked around at their faces, shocked, angry, disbelieving. These people who'd made me feel small for 5 years, who'd chipped away at my confidence with their 1,000 tiny cruelties, who'd tried to remake me in their image of acceptable inadequacy. Thank you all for coming to my birthday dinner, I said. It's been educational. Oh, and Daniel? That Bitcoin you stopped me from buying at 20,000? I bought it at 3,000 with the money my father left me, the strip mall accountant. Sold most at 60,000. The profit from that little Robinhood account is what I used to buy your family's debt. I paused at the edge of their stunned silence. I may be a project, Daniel, but I'm not yours. I'm my own creation. And starting tomorrow, your family empire becomes my reconstruction project. Happy birthday to me. I walked through the restaurant with my head high, leaving behind the sound of Daniel's voice rising in panic as he finally opened the envelope. By the time I reached the door, I could hear the shouting starting, Thomas demanding to see the papers, Catherine's shrill voice cutting through the chaos, Chuck Morrison's heavy footsteps as he left, deal clearly dead. The waiter, the one whose daughter I'd helped, held the door for me. Thank you, he said quietly. For everything. Thank you, I replied, meaning it. For reminding me who I really am. Outside, the October air was sharp and clean. I pulled out my phone to check the time, 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes left of my birthday. 13 minutes left of being the woman they'd tried to make me. At midnight, I would become something else entirely. Something they'd never seen coming, because they'd been too busy looking at their own reflections to notice the shark swimming beneath their boat. As I slid into the waiting car, my phone buzzed with messages. Bankers confirming transfers. Lawyers confirming filings. The machinery of revenge I'd set in motion months ago, clicking into place with beautiful precision. But the last message made me smile. It was from an unknown number, but I recognized the tone. "This is Victoria. I'm not going to pretend we were friends, but I wanted you to know I recorded the whole dinner. Everything they said. If you need it for court, it's yours." They destroyed my trust fund to pay for Daniel's mistakes. Time they learned what that feels like. Happy birthday, Delilah. Make them burn. I leaned back in the leather seat as the car pulled away from the curb. Behind me, through the restaurant's windows, I could see the chaos continuing. Daniel now standing, waving the papers, his face red with rage. His perfect world, crumbling like the souffle I'd left unfinished. "Where to, Mrs. Whitmore?" the driver asked. I smiled at the name. By tomorrow, I'd be changing it back to my maiden name, Delilah Cross. My father's daughter. The strip mall accountant's legacy. "The St. Regis," I said. "I have a suite reserved. Under Cross." As we drove through the city, I thought about the morning. Daniel would wake up to find the locks changed on his office. His parents would be served with eviction notices. The investors he'd been stealing from would receive detailed reports of where their money had really gone. But that was tomorrow's symphony of destruction. Tonight, on the last minutes of my birthday, I was simply Delilah, not his wife, not their disappointment, not anyone's project. I was the architect of their downfall. And I was just getting started. 6 months earlier, the law offices of Hartley, Brennan and Associates occupied the 43rd floor of a Manhattan high-rise that Daniel would never visit.
Too modest, he would say.
Not enough prestige. Which made it perfect for my purposes. Margaret Hartley, senior partner and my secret legal counsel, spread the documents across her mahogany desk like a general planning a siege. She was 73, brilliant, and had built her career destroying men who underestimated her. Exactly the kind of woman Catherine Whitmore would despise. "Your husband's family has been hemorrhaging money for 3 years, she said, adjusting her reading glasses. "They've hidden it well, but the pattern is clear. Bad investments, over-leveraged positions, and your father-in-law has been gambling on margin calls that never paid off." I studied the financial reports, my father's training singing in my blood. He taught me to read numbers like music, to see the story they told beneath their stark black lines. The house. Refinanced twice. They're using a balloon payment structure that comes due in 6 months, October, specifically. If they can't pay the full amount, the bank can foreclose immediately. And if someone were to buy that debt? Margaret's smile was sharp as a blade. Then that someone would effectively own the Whitmore estate. Hypothetically speaking, of course. I traced my finger along the mortgage documents. $3.7 million. Daniel spent more than that on his watch collection, but for his parents, it was everything. Their fortress, their proof of superiority.
"Do it," I said.
Through shell companies. Nothing that traces back to me. Already prepared. She slid another folder across. Cascade Holdings, incorporated in Delaware. Sovereign Trust, based in Nevada. River Mountain Capital, registered in Wyoming. All legitimate, all invisible, all controlled by you through proxies I trust with my life. Over the following months, I became a ghost in the machine of the Whitmore empire. Every public filing, every SEC document, every stockholder report, I absorbed them all. Daniel thought I was taking online yoga classes when I logged into my laptop each morning. In reality, I was attending virtual board meetings for my shell companies, approving purchases of Whitmore Industries stock from disgruntled relatives and small investors. The family's cousin, Edwin, was the first to sell. He'd been cut out of the will after a disagreement with Thomas about business ethics. Apparently, even he had limits the Whitmores had crossed. We met at a coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from the family's usual haunts. "They destroyed my father," he told me, sliding his shares certificates across the table. "Pushed him out of the company he helped build. He died of a heart attack 6 months later." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "Don't be sorry. Be ruthless. That's the only language they understand." He paused, studying me. You're not what they think you are you? No, I admitted. I'm much worse. He laughed, the sound bitter but appreciative.
Good.
They deserve what's coming. Daniel's Aunt Louise was next. She'd been forced to sell her shares to cover her son's medical bills that Thomas could have easily helped with but chose not to. Family helps family, he'd told her, but only when they've proven worthy. He said my son's illness was weakness. She told me over tea in her modest apartment. Said it was natural selection. By August, I controlled 38% of Whitmore Industries through various holdings. The board didn't know. The shares were spread across so many entities that no alarm bells rang. I was a school of piranha, each fish too small to notice until they converged. The forensic accountant came through Victoria, of all people. She'd approached me after one of Catherine's excruciating garden parties, pulling me aside behind the pool house. I know we're not friends, she'd said without preamble. But I also know you're not stupid. And I think you should know what my brother is doing. She'd handed me a flash drive. A friend of mine works at the company. She noticed discrepancies. Daniel's been moving money through shell accounts, billing fake vendors. The amounts match exactly what my parents pulled from my trust fund to cover his losses. He's stealing from everyone, investors, the company, even family. Why tell me? Victoria's laugh was bitter. Because they made me complicit. Had me sign papers I didn't understand when I was 21, made me a board member in name only. If this comes out, I go down too. Unless someone with clean hands exposes it first. I finished. Exactly. The forensic accountant she connected me with was named Mara Chin, a small woman with an FBI background and a grudge against white-collar criminals who thought they were untouchable. She worked out of a small office in Chinatown, surrounded by boxes of files and multiple computer monitors. Your husband is not a smart criminal, she told me after 2 weeks of investigation. He's just been lucky. The invoices are obvious forgeries if anyone bothers to look. The shell companies all link back to a single Cayman Islands account in his name. He didn't even try to hide it properly. How much? $8 million and counting. Mostly from investors in the Morrison development deal. He's been promising returns on a project that doesn't exist, using new investor money to pay off old ones. Classic Ponzi structure. I sat with that information for a moment, feeling the weight of it. This wasn't just about marital cruelty anymore. This was criminal. Federal charges criminal. Document everything, I said. Every transaction, every forged signature, every fake invoice. Make it airtight. The foreclosure papers were the final piece. Margaret had been tracking the Whitmore estate mortgage carefully, waiting for the perfect moment. In September, with 30 days until the balloon payment was due, the bank was getting nervous. Thomas had missed 2 preliminary payments, too proud to admit he couldn't cover them. The bank wants out, Margaret informed me. They're willing to sell the debt at a discount to avoid the hassle of foreclosure. How much? $2.9 million for a $3.7 million debt. They just want it off their books. I thought about the Bitcoin sales, the quiet investments that had multiplied, the inheritance from my father that I'd turned into a fortune while pretending to be a decorative wife. Do it. The purchase went through on September 25th, one day before my birthday. The bank was relieved. The Whitmores were oblivious. And I held their ancestral home in my hands like a grenade, with the pin pulled. The night before my birthday, I sat in my home office, the one Daniel called my craft room, and reviewed everything. The stockholder agreements, the forensic reports, the foreclosure notices, the evidence of embezzlement. 5 years of marriage reduced to paper and numbers, each document a nail in the coffin of the Whitmore empire. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that I recognized as Mara's burner phone. Found something else. Daniel pledged the same collateral to 2 different lenders. That's federal fraud. FBI-level fraud. Are you sure you want to proceed? I thought about that morning 5 years ago, when Daniel had proposed. How he'd gotten down on one knee in front of his entire family at their 4th of July party, making sure everyone saw him choosing me. How Catherine had pulled me aside afterward and said, "Don't get too comfortable. Women like you are practice wives." Enjoy it while it lasts. I texted back. Proceed. Present day, October 15th, my birthday. The morning of my birthday had started with such small disappointments, but I'd known what was coming. Every humiliation, every dismissive comment, every cruel joke, they were all just fuel for the fire I was about to light. As I sat at that dinner table, listening to Daniel's toast, feeling the eyes of his friends and family dissecting me, I thought about my father. He died when I was 22, just before I met Daniel. A heart attack at his desk, working late to help a client who couldn't afford a big firm. The strip mall accountant, as Daniel called him, who'd built his whole life on helping ordinary people navigate a system designed to crush them. Never let them see you coming, Lila, he'd told me once. The powerful only fall when they're looking the wrong way. I'd been looking the wrong way for 5 years. Or so they thought. The waiter, Miguel, I'd learned his name, had been serving the Whitmore family at various restaurants for a decade. Always invisible to them, just another pair of hands bringing their food. But I'd noticed him that first year, seen how his hands shook when Thomas berated him for a wine selection, how Catherine would complain about him to managers just because she could. I'd tracked him down, learned about his daughter's academic brilliance and financial struggles. The scholarship I'd funded through an anonymous foundation had changed her trajectory. Pre-med at Columbia, full ride, a future that didn't involve serving cruel rich people who didn't see her father's humanity. It was Miguel who'd given me the idea for the public revelation. They treat us like we're not here, he'd said when I'd met him to discuss the scholarship. Like we're furniture. But we see everything. We know all their secrets. And now, at this birthday dinner that was supposed to be another humiliation, another reminder of my worthlessness, all those secrets were about to spill across the table like the wine Thomas had just knocked over while grabbing for the envelope. The document fell open, pages spreading across the white tablecloth like blood on snow. Thomas's face went from red to white as he read, his hands beginning to shake. "This is fake," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. This has to be fake." "The letterhead is from our bank," Catherine said, pulling another page toward her. Her face crumbled as she read. "Thomas, this says we have 48 hours to pay the full balloon payment or face immediate foreclosure." "Which you can't do," I said calmly, still seated, still composed. "Because you liquidated everything to cover Daniel's losses from the Harriman deal. You know, the one where he promised a 30% return in 6 months? The investors are still waiting." Chuck Morrison had gone very quiet, his face pale. "The Harriman deal, Daniel, you said that was fully funded." "It was," Daniel protested, but sweat was beading on his forehead. "It just needs more time." "Time you don't have," I interrupted. I pulled out my phone, showing them an email timestamp. 40 minutes ago, Cascade Holdings, that's me, officially called in the debt. You have until midnight Sunday to pay in full, or the house transfers to me Monday morning. You can't. Thomas stood, his chair scraping back. You don't have that kind of money. You're nobody. You're nothing. You're the woman who bought Bitcoin at $3,000 after your son mocked me for wanting to buy it at $20,000. The woman who invested in 7 biotech companies while you all thought I was playing with pretend money. The woman who's been slowly, carefully, methodically buying every available share of Whitmore Industries while you were too busy congratulating yourselves to notice. I stood then, pulling another document from my purse. This is a record of shareholdings as of market close today. Cascade Holdings, 12%. Sovereign Trust, 15%. River Mountain Capital, 11%. Various smaller entities. I trailed off, letting them do the math. That's... James had gone pale. That's 53%. Controlling interest, I confirmed. As of Monday morning, I call an emergency board meeting. First item, full forensic audit going back 5 years. Second item, Daniel's immediate termination pending investigation of embezzlement. Embezzlement. Marcus laughed nervously. That's ridiculous. Daniel would never. I pulled out Mara's report, thick as a phone book. Would you like to see the invoices for Pinnacle Consulting? Orion Development Group? Phoenix Rising Ventures? All companies that don't exist except on paper, all paid millions for services never rendered, all traced back to accounts controlled by Daniel. Daniel lunged for the report, but I pulled it back. Copies have already been sent to the SEC, the FBI, and the District Attorney's Office. They'll be unsealed Monday morning unless... Unless what? Daniel's voice was strangled. Unless you all sit down, shut up, and listen to exactly how this is going to go. The restaurant had gone silent around us. Other diners were openly staring now, the drama at our table more compelling than their Michelin-starred meals. A server approached tentatively, but Miguel intercepted him, whispering something that made him retreat. "You can't do this." Catherine's voice had lost all its cultured polish. "This is extortion. This is business." I cut her off. "Isn't that what you always said, Thomas? That real power comes from grinding your opponents into dust? Consider this your grinding." I remained standing, my glass of champagne untouched in front of me. The bubbles rose lazily to the surface, each one catching the light like a tiny explosion. "Let me explain what happens next," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the hushed restaurant. Option 1. You cooperate fully. Sign over your remaining shares, submit to a full audit, and accept the consequences of Daniel's crimes. In return, I don't pursue criminal charges for the family members who are genuinely unaware. You'll lose the house, the company, most of your assets, but you might avoid prison. Prison. Victoria's voice was small. She'd been silent until now, watching the destruction unfold. "Did you really think Daniel was smart enough to hide embezzlement on his own?" I looked at Thomas. Who taught him to create shell companies? Who introduced him to the Cayman Islands banker? Who co-signed the fraudulent loan applications? Thomas's face went gray. He sat down heavily, his hand clutching his chest. Option 2, I continued. You fight. You hire lawyers, you challenge everything, you try to discredit me. And I release everything. Not just the financial crimes, everything. The affair with the Morrison nanny, Catherine. Yes, I know about that. The sexual harassment settlements Thomas has been paying for 20 years. The DUI Daniel killed someone in that you paid to make disappear. Every single secret.
How?
Daniel whispered. How do you know? Because you taught me, darling. You taught me that information is power, that money buys silence, that everyone has a price. So, I found the prices. The nanny was happy to talk for $50,000 and a green card. Your father's victims were eager to share their stories once they knew someone was listening. And the family of that teenager you killed? They've been waiting 15 years for justice. I picked up my champagne glass, raising it slightly. So, a toast seems appropriate, don't you think? No one moved. The entire table sat frozen, like figures in a tableau of destruction. To the Whitmore family, I said, my voice clear and carrying. May you find in bankruptcy the humility you never found in wealth. May you discover in powerlessness the empathy you never showed to the powerless. And may you learn, finally and forever, that the people you step on while climbing your ladder of success are the same ones who'll saw through the rungs when you're at the top. I took a sip of champagne. It tasted like victory. This is insane. Daniel stood, his chair falling backward. You're insane. I'll have you committed. With what authority? I asked calmly. The prenup you insisted on? The one that gives you no claim to any assets I brought into the marriage or acquired independently. The same one that specifically states that neither party can make medical decisions for the other? You really should have read what you signed, Daniel. I'll divorce you. I'll destroy you in court. Please do. I have Victoria's recording of tonight's dinner. Thank you for that, by the way. I nodded to his sister, who looked startled. Your whole toast about how I'm nothing, how I'm a failure, how you tried to train me. I'm sure the judge will find it illuminating. Margaret Hartley chose that moment to enter the restaurant. 73 years old, wearing a simple black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, she commanded attention just by existing. She walked to our table with measured steps, carrying a leather briefcase. Mrs. Cross, she said, deliberately using my maiden name. I have the emergency injunction you requested. Asset freeze on all Whitmore accounts, effective immediately pending investigation. You can't freeze our accounts. Catherine shrieked. We have bills, we have. You have 48 hours to present a financial hardship case to the court, Margaret replied coolly. Though given the 3 luxury cars, 2 boats, and $6 million art collection in your names, I doubt you'll qualify. She pulled more documents from her briefcase, setting them in front of Daniel. Separation agreement. Sign it, and Mrs. Cross won't pursue charges for marital asset fraud. Yes, we know about the accounts you hid. Don't sign it, and she'll take everything the prenup doesn't protect. Which is everything, I added helpfully, since all your assets are either stolen or leveraged against debts you can't pay. Chuck Morrison stood abruptly. I need to make some calls. He looked at Daniel with undisguised disgust. The Harriman deal. You used my name to attract investors. My reputation. Chuck, wait. Daniel started, but Morrison was already walking away, his phone pressed to his ear. One by one, the others began to leave. Marcus muttered something about needing to review his contracts with Whitmore Industries. James simply walked out without a word. The other guests, the ones who'd laughed at Daniel's toast, scattered like roaches when the lights come on. Soon, it was just the Whitmore family, Margaret, and me. There has to be another way, Thomas said, his voice broken. The house, it's been in our family for 70 years. And it's been leveraged to the hilt for the last 10. I replied. You could have sold it, downsized, lived within your means. But that would have meant admitting you weren't as wealthy as you pretended. So instead, you mortgaged your legacy for the appearance of success. What do you want? Catherine asked. Really? What do you want from us? I thought about it, really considered the question. What did I want? Revenge? I was already getting that. Their money? I had more than enough of my own. Their respect? That ship had sailed and sunk. I want you to know how it feels, I said finally. To be dismissed. To be humiliated. To have your worth questioned every single day. To be told you're nothing, you're nobody. You're a disappointment. I want you to taste, just once, the bitter meal you've been serving others your entire lives. I pulled one more document from my purse. This is a listing agreement. The house goes on the market Monday unless you can pay the full balloon payment by Sunday midnight. The proceeds will establish a foundation for financial abuse victims, people whose spouses controlled them through money, isolated them, destroyed their self-worth. You can't sell our house. Thomas tried to stand again, but his legs wouldn't support him. It's not your house anymore, I reminded him. It's mine, just like the company is mine. Just like Daniel's future is mine to destroy or salvage. I looked at my soon-to-be ex-husband. He'd gone quiet, his face cycling through emotions, rage, fear, disbelief, and finally, a dawning realization. You planned this, he said slowly. For how long? Since the day your mother told me I was a practice wife. Since your father said women don't understand real business. Since you laughed when I suggested investing in Tesla early, then took credit when you did it yourself a year later. Since every single moment you and your family made me feel small. Victoria spoke up, her voice stronger now. The offers to buy my shares, that was you? Every generous offer that came your way in the last 6 months, I confirmed. I knew you needed the money after they drained your trust fund. I also knew you were the only one in this family with enough conscience to keep the evidence of what Daniel was doing. You used me. I gave you 3 times market value for shares in a company that's about to be worthless once the embezzlement comes out. You're the only one walking away from this with money in your pocket. You're welcome. Victoria actually smiled slightly. You know, I never liked you, but I respect the hell out of this. Daniel, Thomas wheezed, do something. Fix this. But Daniel was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. For 5 years, he'd seen what he expected, a pretty girl from a middle-class family who should be grateful for his attention. He'd never seen the woman who'd stayed up until 3 a.m. studying market reports, who'd learned 3 programming languages to understand fintech, who'd built a network of allies among all the people he'd ignored or insulted. There's nothing to fix, Daniel said quietly. She owns us. Smart boy, I said. Now, here's what's going to happen. Margaret has incorporation documents for the new Whitmore Industries, soon to be Cross Technologies. Every employee keeps their job except you, Daniel. Every ethical vendor gets paid in full. Every investor who is genuinely deceived gets their money back. The only people who lose are the ones sitting at this table. Where will we go? Catherine whispered. If you take the house. I've arranged a rental, I said. A nice 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. The landlord is someone Thomas foreclosed on 15 years ago. Remember the Hendersons? They lost everything when you called in their loan early. They're willing to rent to you, though. They believe in second chances. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. I pushed back from the table, gathering my things. Oh, one more thing. The waiter you've been ignoring all night? Miguel? His daughter just got into Harvard Medical School. The scholarship that made it possible came from dividends on investments I made with money you thought I was too stupid to manage. She's going to be a doctor, saving lives, while your son is going to be lucky to avoid federal prison. I looked around the table one last time. I spent 5 years sitting at tables like this, listening to you talk about breeding and pedigree and natural superiority. But here's what you never understood. Money doesn't make you superior. It just amplifies who you already are. And you? I gestured to all of them. You're small, petty, cruel people who happen to inherit wealth. Take away the money, and what's left? Silence. Nothing. I answered my own question. Just like you always said I was. Margaret gathered the signed documents. Daniel had signed the separation agreement with shaking hands. Thomas had signed the asset transfer papers while Catherine wept and placed them in her briefcase. We'll file these first thing Monday morning, she said. I'd advise you all to seek individual counsel. This is no longer a family matter. It's a criminal investigation. As we walked toward the door, Daniel called out, Delilah. I turned. Was any of it real? He asked. Did you ever love me? I considered the question. I loved who I thought you were. But that person never existed. Did he? You were always exactly this. Cruel, entitled, hollow. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise. So this was all revenge? No, I said. This was justice. Revenge would have been destroying you just for the satisfaction of it. This is about making sure you never do to another woman what you did to me. This is about protecting every employee you would have cheated, every investor you would have defrauded, every person you would have stepped on to climb a little higher. I took one last look at them. The mighty Whitmores, reduced to shock and tears and shattered dignity. Happy birthday to me, I said, and walked out into the New York night. Outside, Miguel was waiting by a town car. Your ride, Mrs. Cross. Thank you, Miguel. For everything. Thank you for seeing us, he replied. The invisible ones. My daughter wants to meet you. To thank you herself. I'd like that, I said, meaning it. But not as some benefactor. Just as someone who believes brilliant young women deserve chances, regardless of where they come from. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the restaurant one more time. Through the window, I could see them still sitting there, Daniel with his head in his hands, Thomas clutching his chest, Catherine weeping into a napkin that cost more than most people's daily wages. Victoria stood and walked out, catching my eye through the car window. She raised her hand slightly, not quite a wave. More an acknowledgement. A recognition between women who'd both been trapped by that family in different ways. My phone buzzed with messages. Bankers confirming the asset freezes. The forensic team confirming they'd received cooperation agreements from 3 former employees. The FBI confirming they'd opened a preliminary investigation. But the last message was the one that mattered. It was from my lawyer at Hartley, Brennan and Associates. Not Margaret, but her junior partner, a young woman named Sarah who'd grown up in the Bronx and graduated first in her class at Yale. The foundation papers are ready for your signature. The Whitmore estate sale will fund financial literacy programs for abuse victims for the next decade. Their house of cards will become a house of hope. I smiled, leaning back in the leather seats. 5 years ago, Daniel had stood in front of his family and slipped a ring on my finger, claiming me as his property, his project, his pretty failure. Tonight, I'd taken that ring off and left it on the table next to the divorce papers. Tomorrow it would be sold, the proceeds going to the same foundation. The Whitmore men had built their empire on the backs of people they considered beneath them. They'd climbed their ladder of success by stepping on everyone they saw as less than. They just never counted on one of those people learning to climb faster, smarter, and with receipts for every rung of the ladder they'd corrupted. The city lights blurred past the window as we drove toward the St. Regis, toward my suite, toward my future. Behind me, the Whitmore empire crumbled into dust, its foundation revealed to be nothing more than arrogance and air. And ahead? Ahead was everything they said I'd never have: power, purpose, and the absolute certainty that I'd never again let anyone tell me what I was worth. The clock on my phone showed 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes left of the worst birthday of my life. 2 minutes until I turned 29 for real, not as Mrs. Daniel Whitmore, but as Delilah Cross, my father's daughter, my own woman, and the architect of the most beautiful destruction Manhattan society had ever seen. At exactly midnight, my phone lit up with one final notification. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "My name is Jennifer Morrison, Chuck's daughter. The one Daniel wanted to upgrade to. I just wanted you to know, I never would have touched him. I've been watching you for years, admiring how you handled yourself with grace despite their cruelty. Tonight, you showed every woman in that room that we don't have to shrink ourselves to fit their expectations. Thank you for the lesson. Happy birthday, Ms. Cross. You've earned everything that's coming to you, and they've earned everything that's coming to them." I closed my eyes, feeling something I hadn't felt in 5 years.
Free.
The St. Regis suite was everything the Whitmore mansion pretended to be: genuinely luxurious without desperation, elegant without ostentation. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching Manhattan glitter below, my phone buzzing relentlessly on the marble counter behind me. 47 missed calls from Daniel, 23 from Thomas, 18 from Catherine, even 12 from Victoria, though hers I might actually return. It was 12:23 a.m., officially October 16th, 23 minutes into my 29th year, and the Whitmore empire was hemorrhaging in real time. The first call I answered was from Margaret Hartley. "They're in the lobby," she said without preamble. "Daniel and his father. Hotel security has them contained, but they're making a scene. Let me guess, threatening legal action? Among other things. Daniel's claiming you're mentally unstable, that you've stolen corporate documents, that this is all an elaborate breakdown. His father is name-dropping every judge he knows." I smiled, walking to the suites bar and pouring myself a glass of the Macallan 25 I'd ordered. "Send them up, Delilah. Send them up, Margaret. But have security stay close. And make sure you're recording everything." 5 minutes later, the doorbell chimed. I opened it to find Daniel and Thomas, both disheveled, both reeking of desperation and scotch. Daniel's perfect hair was mussed, his Hermes tie askew. Thomas's face had gone from red to an unhealthy purple. "You calculating bitch," Daniel started, pushing past me into the suite. "Please come in," I said dryly, closing the door. "Make yourselves comfortable. Though not too comfortable, checkout is at noon." "This is kidnapping," Thomas wheezed, dropping onto the cream sofa, "holding our assets hostage." "It's a foreclosure," I corrected, sitting across from them in a wingback chair. "You know about those, Thomas. You've initiated enough of them. Remember the Petersons? The Chens? The Williams family with the disabled daughter? You called it natural market correction when you took their homes. That was business. So is this." Daniel paced to the window, his hands clenched. "The Morrison deal, Chuck's pulling out. He's telling everyone I'm a fraud. My reputation is accurately reflecting your character for the first time," I finished. "Novel experience for you, I'm sure." He spun to face me. "I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone you're insane, that you seduced me for my money, that what? That you married a woman smarter than you? That your wife quietly outperformed your entire portfolio while you were bragging about deals that didn't exist? That the nobody from nowhere built an empire while you were stealing from yours."
My phone rang.
Margaret again. "Speaker," she said when I answered. You'll want them to hear this. Go ahead. The Wall Street Journal just posted a breaking news alert. Whitmore Industries under federal investigation for embezzlement. The stock will crater at market open. Thomas made it sound like a wounded animal. Our shareholders will be protected under my restructuring plan, I said. Except for you, of course. Your shares will be liquidated to pay restitution. I need to call our lawyer, Daniel said, pulling out his phone. Richard Brennan? He was disbarred 6 months ago for ethics violations. I know because I reported him to the Bar Association after discovering he was helping you forge documents. Or did you mean Patrick Stevenson? He dropped you as clients about. I checked my watch 18 minutes ago when the FBI served him with a subpoena. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Catherine and Victoria, both in hastily thrown-on clothes. Catherine's face was streaked with mascara, her usual perfect composure shattered. The house, she gasped. There are notices posted on the door. Foreclosure notices. The neighbors can see them. Yes, that's typically how foreclosure notices work, I said. Public shame is part of the process. You should know, you've inflicted it on enough people. Victoria moved to the bar, pouring herself a drink without asking. The Twitter posts have started. Someone leaked Daniel's toast from dinner. The video is everywhere. Daniel grabbed her phone, his face draining as he watched himself on the screen, his voice tinny through the speakers. My most successful failure, still unfinished, still a failure. 2 million views in an hour, Victoria noted. The comments are colorful. Lots of creative suggestions for where you can stick your superiority complex. You did this. Catherine pointed at me, her fingers shaking. You leaked it. Actually, I didn't. That would be. I checked my phone. Rebecca Morrison, Chuck's wife. Apparently, she's been recording Daniel's misogynistic rants for years, waiting for the right moment. Your toast was the final straw. My phone buzzed with a text. I read it and couldn't help but smile. What? Daniel demanded. What now? Your Centurion card was just declined at the Four Seasons bar. Apparently, American Express doesn't extend credit to people under federal investigation. This is impossible, Thomas muttered, his head in his hands. 70 years of building this family's reputation. Built on what? I asked. Seriously, Thomas, what did you actually build? Your father made the fortune legitimately, from what I can tell. You've spent 40 years losing it while pretending you were growing it. Leveraging assets, borrowing against borrowing, shell games with debt. You're not a dynasty. You're a house of cards in a suit from Savile Row. The hotel phone rang. I answered it, listened, then handed it to Daniel. It's for you. Someone named Alexei. Daniel's face went white. He took the phone with a trembling hand. Alexei, I can explain. His voice cut off as he listened. That's not. You can't, please, the payment is coming. He hung up slowly. Russian investors? I guessed. The ones you promised 30% returns in 6 months? They don't strike me as the patient type. You don't understand, Daniel said quietly. These people, they don't just take you to court. They break legs? Concrete shoes? How cinematically tragic for you. I stood, refilling my drink. Maybe you should have thought about that before taking their money for a project that never existed. Help us, Catherine said suddenly. The words seemed to physically pain her.
Please.
You've made your point. You've won. Just help us. Why would I do that? Because you're not cruel, Victoria said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. I've watched you for 5 years, Delilah. You had every reason to be cruel, and you never were. Until tonight. This isn't cruelty, I said. This is consequence. There's a difference. Margaret's voice came through my phone again. The FBI is at the Whitmore estate. They have a warrant. Catherine let out a sob. Thomas stood abruptly, swaying slightly. I need to get there. My documents, your fraudulent contracts? Your second set of books? The hard drives you thought you destroyed but actually just moved to the pool house closet? I pulled up a photo on my phone. These documents? The image showed boxes of papers and hard drives, all labeled with FBI evidence tags. How long? Daniel asked, his voice hollow. How long have you been planning this? Since the moment I realized you'd never see me as an equal. Since your mother called me a practice wife. Since your father said women don't understand real business. But the real question is, how long have you been planning to discard me? Silence. That's what I thought. Victoria, you want to tell them, or should I? Victoria took a long sip of her drink. Daniel's been moving assets to the Caymans for 18 months. He has divorce papers drawn up, dated for November 1st. The plan was to file right after the Morrison deal closed. Victoria. Catherine gasped. You knew. I know everything, Victoria said bitterly. I know about Dad's gambling debts. I know about your affair with a tennis instructor. Oh, you thought that was secret? She laughed at Catherine's expression. I know Daniel killed someone in that DUI. I know because I've been keeping records. Insurance, I called it. You treacherous little, Thomas started. Careful, I warned. Victoria's the only one of you with clean hands. Mostly clean, anyway. She's also the only one I'm willing to help. What do you mean? Victoria asked. I handed her an envelope. Incorporation papers for a new company. Whitmore Consulting, you keep the name, but it's yours. Clean start, initial funding of $2 million, and a client list of people who respected your grandfather, not your father. Why? Victoria's voice was thick with unshed tears. Because you tried to warn me, even when we weren't friends. Because you kept evidence of their crimes. Because out of this entire family, you're the only one who ever showed a moment of genuine humanity. This is bribery, Thomas snarled. Turning our own family. This is salvation. I corrected. Victoria gets a life raft. The rest of you get to swim.
My phone rang.
A number I didn't recognize. Hello. Mrs. Cross. The voice was male, official. This is Special Agent David Kim with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We've reviewed the documents your attorney provided. We'll need Daniel Whitmore to come in for questioning first thing Monday morning. He's right here, I said. Would you like to speak with him? Daniel backed away from the phone like it was a snake. That won't be necessary, Agent Kim said. But Mrs. Cross? The level of detail in your documentation. Have you ever considered consulting for the FBI? We could use someone with your forensic financial skills. I'll think about it, I said, ending the call. The room was silent except for Catherine's quiet crying. There's a car waiting downstairs, I said. It will take you to the house. You have until dawn to gather your personal belongings, clothes, family photos, nothing of monetary value. The FBI will supervise. After that, the locks change. Where will we go? Catherine whispered. I told you. There's an apartment in Queens. We can't live in Queens. Thomas roared. Do you have any idea who we are? Yes, I said simply. You're broke. You're under federal investigation. You're about to lose everything you've ever valued. You're exactly what you always feared being: ordinary, unremarkable, forgettable. Daniel stood, moving toward me with something dark in his eyes. I could hurt you. Right here. Right now. You could try, I agreed. But Margaret has been recording this entire conversation. Security is right outside. And frankly, Daniel, we both know you're only brave when you're sure you'll win. You're not sure anymore, are you? He stopped, his hands clenching and unclenching. Besides, I continued, you need me cooperative. The FBI will offer you a deal. Testify against your father, plead guilty to lesser charges, maybe serve 3 to 5 instead of 20. But that deal disappears if you're charged with assault. Or if I decide to share the recording from your office. What recording? I pulled up an audio file on my phone. Daniel's voice filled the room. The Henderson deal? We'll lowball them, then when they can't make the payment, we foreclose. Easy money. The old man's got cancer. He won't last long enough to fight it. That's illegal recording. Actually, it's not. New York is a one-party consent state, and your secretary Miranda was very willing to wear a wire after you fired her for refusing your advances. She's also testifying Monday, by the way. Thomas had gone gray. How many people did you turn? I didn't turn anyone, Thomas. I just gave them an opportunity to tell the truth about you. It turns out, when you treat people like disposable assets, they're eager to dispose of you in return. By 6 a.m., the news cycle had begun in earnest. I watched from my suite as the sun painted Manhattan gold, my laptop open to multiple news sites, all running variations of the same story. Whitmore dynasty crumbles. Federal investigation launched into prominent New York family. Viral video. Finance heirs' cruel birthday toast backfires spectacularly. David versus Goliath. How one woman brought down Wall Street's most notorious family. The New York Post, never one for subtlety, ran with, "Toasty billionaire's bitter birthday rant costs him everything."
My phone rang.
Margaret.
They're fighting back, she said.
Daniels hired Cromwell and Associates. They're expensive, aggressive, and completely amoral. They're already spinning this as a vindictive wife's breakdown. Let them try. Delilah, I need to warn you. Cromwell plays dirty. They'll dig into everything, your past, your family, anything they can use to discredit you. My father was an honest accountant who died at his desk helping people. My mother sold makeup at Bloomingdale's until arthritis forced her to retire. I went to public school, put myself through college, and earned everything I have. What exactly are they going to find? They'll manufacture something if they have to. Then we'd better make sure the truth is louder than their lies. By 8 a.m., the smear campaign had begun. A gossip blog ran a story claiming I'd been in a psychiatric facility, complete with fabricated medical records. Another suggested I'd been having an affair with Margaret, playing into every sexist stereotype they could find. A third claimed I was actually broke, and this was all an elaborate con. I called in my own cavalry. Sarah Martinez, the journalist who'd won a Pulitzer for exposing corporate fraud, answered on the first ring. "Miss Cross? I've been hoping you'd call. The Whitmore story is everywhere, but I have a feeling there's more to it. How would you like exclusive access to 20 years of financial records showing systematic fraud, tax evasion, and worse?"
I'm listening.
One condition, you verify everything. No unnamed sources, no speculation. Just facts.
Done.
When can we meet? My attorney's office. 1 hour. The meeting with Sarah was illuminating. She'd already done her homework, pulling public records that painted a damning picture of the Whitmore's business practices. They've foreclosed on 43 properties in the last decade, she said, spreading documents across Margaret's conference table. But here's the interesting part. 31 of those foreclosures were on properties they'd sold with predatory loans. They were setting people up to fail. Mara Chun, who joined us, added her findings. It gets worse. They were bundling these bad loans and selling them to pension funds as secure investments. Teachers, firefighters, municipal workers, all losing retirement savings so the Whitmores could maintain their lifestyle. "The FBI will want this," Margaret said. "The FBI already has it," I replied. "I sent it to Agent Kim this morning." Sarah's eyes gleamed. "This is Pulitzer material. But Ms. Cross, they're going to come after you hard. The Cromwell firm, they've already got PIs digging into your background. Let them dig. They'll find a woman who worked 3 jobs to pay for college, who studied until her eyes burned, who invested every spare penny instead of spending it on designer handbags. If that's the worst they can find, I'll wear it as a badge of honor." My phone buzzed. "Victoria, you need to see the news," she said without preamble. The local NBC affiliate was running breaking news. Daniel, standing outside the Whitmore estate, addressing cameras. He'd cleaned himself up, worn his most sympathetic suit, even managed to produce what looked like tears. "My wife is clearly experiencing a mental health crisis," he was saying. "I'm deeply concerned for her welfare. These accusations, these forged documents, it's all part of her delusion. I'm asking for privacy as we get her the help she desperately needs." "That bastard," Sarah muttered. But I smiled. "He just made a crucial mistake." "What mistake?" Margaret asked. "He went on record claiming the documents are forged. That's demonstrably false, and he knows it. He just committed perjury on live television." I called Agent Kim. "Did you see the news?" "We did. We've just upgraded his status from person of interest to primary suspect. Claims of forged evidence in an active federal investigation. Your husband isn't very smart, is he? Ex-husband, soon. And no, he's not. He's just been surrounded by people who told him he was. By noon, the counter-narrative was building. Sarah's first article had gone live. The systematic destruction, how the Whitmore empire was built on predatory lending. The response was immediate. Dozens of families came forward with their own stories of being destroyed by Whitmore Industries. The Hendersons, whose medical debt had been exploited. The Nguyen's, whose restaurant had been seized over a technicality. The Williams family, who'd lost their home while their daughter was undergoing chemotherapy. Each story added weight to the truth. The Whitmores weren't victims. They were predators. But the real bombshell came at 2 p.m. Mara called, her voice tight with excitement. Delilah, I found something. Something big. Bigger than embezzlement? Murder. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The DUI victim, she continued. Jason Rodriguez, 17 years old. The official report says he died on impact. But I found the original medical examiner's report, the one before it was amended. He lived for 3 hours. If they'd called an ambulance instead of their lawyer, he might have survived. The Me was pressured to change the report. By Thomas Whitmore. I have emails, Delilah. Thomas Whitmore directly ordering the cover-up of a teenage boy's death. Send everything to Agent Kim and Sarah. And make copies, lots of copies. The story broke at 3 p.m. By 3:30, there were protesters outside the Whitmore estate. By 4 p.m., the FBI had arrested Thomas on charges of obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and accessory to manslaughter after the fact. I watched from my hotel suite as they led him away in handcuffs, his purple face now gray with shock. Catherine stood in the doorway of their soon-to-be foreclosed mansion, looking like a ghost of her former self. Daniel's press conference had backfired spectacularly. Instead of a sympathetic victim, the public saw him as a gaslighting abuser trying to weaponize mental health stigma against his wife. #Believe Delilah started trending. Women shared their own stories of financial abuse, of husbands who'd controlled them through money, of families who'd treated them like property. Victoria called again. They're destroying each other. Dad's lawyer is saying Daniel acted alone. Daniel's saying Dad orchestrated everything. Mom's claiming she knew nothing, but there are checks with her signature all over the fraudulent deals. The family that prays together, betrays together. That's cold, Delilah. That's karma, Victoria. That evening, Margaret convened a war council. Sarah Martinez, Mara Chun, Agent Kim via video call, and surprisingly, Chuck Morrison. I owe you an apology, Chuck said without preamble. I was part of that toxic culture. I laughed at things I shouldn't have. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. If you'll let me, I'd like to help. Why? Because my daughter Rebecca, you remember, the one Daniel wanted to upgrade to? She told me if I didn't make this right, I'd lose her forever. And frankly, Mrs. Cross, she's the only thing in my life worth saving. What are you offering? Testimony. Documents. 40 years of insider knowledge about the Whitmore's crimes. And a $10 million donation to your foundation for financial abuse victims. I studied him. Chuck Morrison, real estate mogul, embodiment of old boys club privilege, but also a father who loved his daughter enough to change. Make it $20 million and you have a deal. Done. Sarah was typing furiously on her laptop. The Times wants to run a feature. The woman who brought down Wall Street's worst family. Front page Sunday edition. No, I said. Everyone looked at me in surprise. Not the woman who brought down. Make it the women. Plural. This isn't just my story. It's Miranda's, who recorded Daniel's sexual harassment. It's Rebecca Morrison's, who exposed the misogyny. It's Victoria's, who kept the evidence. It's every woman who's been told she's too emotional to handle money, too stupid to understand business, too worthless to matter. Sarah smiled. The women who brought down Wall Street's worst family. I like it better. Agent Kim cleared his throat on the video call. Miss Cross, we've finished our preliminary review. The evidence you've provided will likely result in a combined 300 years of prison sentences across all defendants. This is one of the most comprehensive financial fraud cases we've ever seen. And the victims? The families they destroyed. The asset forfeiture will create a restitution fund. Every family they defrauded will be made whole, with interest. Good. After everyone left, I stood at the window again, watching the city transition from day to night. My phone had been buzzing with interview requests, book deal offers, movie rights inquiries. I ignored them all. Victoria arrived at 10 p.m., carrying a bottle of wine and looking exhausted. They're all turning on each other, she said, pouring 2 glasses. Dad's blaming Daniel, Daniel's blaming Dad, Mom's playing victim. The lawyers are circling like vultures. And you? I'm free, she said simply. For the first time in my life, I'm free. The company you offered me, I accept. But I want to run it differently. Ethically. Maybe even. She paused, helpfully. That's the only way to run it. We drank in silence for a while. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. When did you really decide to do this? Was it one moment or a gradual thing? I thought about it. It was death by 1,000 cuts, but the killing blow? Your mother's Christmas party 2 years ago. She introduced me to someone as Daniel's current wife. Not his wife. His current wife. Like I was a placeholder, a temporary fixture until the real thing came along. She was wrong. No, I said. She was right. I was temporary. I was never meant to last in their world. The difference is neither were they.
They just didn't know it yet.
Victoria raised her glass. To temporary things ending permanently. To permanent changes from temporary women. We clinked glasses as the city sparkled below, a million lights bearing witness to the end of an empire and the birth of something better. My phone lit up with one final message of the night. From Jason Rodriguez's mother. Thank you for giving my son justice. The Whitmores took everything from us. Our son, our hope, our faith in the system. You gave us back our faith. You proved that sometimes Goliath really does fall. I typed back. Your son's memory is what brings them down. His truth, finally told. The Jason Rodriguez Foundation for Traffic Victims will be funded in perpetuity from the Whitmore estate sale. His name will help others long after theirs is forgotten. The clock showed 11:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, it would be October 17th. 2 days since my birthday, since Daniel's toast, since I'd stopped pretending to be small. The Whitmores had built their empire on the belief that some people mattered and others didn't. That breeding and bank accounts determined worth. That cruelty was strength and kindness was weakness. They were wrong about everything.
Especially about me.
Monday, October 19th, 9 a.m. The Whitmore Industries boardroom occupied the entire 52nd floor, its glass walls offering panoramic views of Manhattan. I'd been here exactly once before, 5 years ago, when Daniel had brought me to show off his kingdom. I'd stood quietly while he'd pointed out his father's portrait, the mahogany table that had been his grandfather's, the carefully curated displays of power and permanence. Now I walked in as majority shareholder, and the kingdom was mine to dismantle. The board members were already assembled, 12 faces ranging from nervous to hostile. I recognized most of them. Cronies of Thomas's, golf buddies who'd rubber-stamped every fraudulent deal, men who'd gotten rich by looking the other way. At the far end of the table sat Daniel, flanked by 2 lawyers from Cromwell and Associates. His face was gaunt, 3 days of crisis having carved away his golden boy veneer. To his right, Thomas's empty chair seemed to loom. He was currently in federal custody, bail denied as a flight risk. I took my place at the head of the table, Margaret Hartley to my right, Marachin to my left. Behind me, Sarah Martinez sat in the observer section, her recorder visible, her presence a reminder that everything said here would be public record. This emergency session is called to order, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. As majority shareholder with 53% ownership, I move for immediate votes on the following items. This is illegal. One of Daniel's lawyers interrupted. Our client contests the legitimacy of those shares. Your client, Margaret said smoothly, signed off on every single share transfer as CEO. His signature is on the approval documents, unless he'd like to admit to negligence in his fiduciary duties. The lawyer fell silent. First item, I continued. Immediate termination of Daniel Whitmore as CEO, pending criminal investigation. You can't, Daniel started. I can. I am. All in favor. My shares counted as automatic yes. 3 other board members, seeing which way the wind was blowing, raised their hands. Gerald Morrison, Chuck's brother, was the surprising fourth. Motion carries. Security will escort Mr. Whitmore out after this meeting. Second item. Full forensic audit of all company finances, going back 10 years. That's a witch hunt. Daniel's other lawyer protested. No, I said, pulling up Mara's preliminary report on the screen behind me. This is a witch hunt. The screen filled with evidence, forged invoices, shell companies, fraudulent transfers. Gasps echoed around the table as board members realized their own signatures were on some of these documents. Every person in this room is potentially implicated, I said calmly. The FBI has copies of everything. Your choice is simple. Cooperate with the audit and potentially receive leniency, or fight it and definitely face prosecution. This is extortion, Daniel snarled. This is exactly what you did to the Morrison family 2 years ago, I replied. To the Hendersons 3 years ago. To the Nguyen's 5 years ago. You called it aggressive negotiation. How does it feel from the other side? Victoria entered the room then, not as a family member, but as a witness. She carried a box of documents and a laptop. I've been keeping records, she announced to the room. Every illegal deal, every forged document, every bribe. 7 years of evidence, all verified, all copied, all submitted to federal authorities this morning. You traitorous. Daniel lunged toward his sister, but security stepped forward, restraining him. I learned from the best, Victoria said coldly. You taught me that family loyalty only matters when it's profitable. Well, brother dear, you're no longer profitable. She opened her laptop, projecting an email onto the screen. This is from Daniel to our father, dated 6 months ago. Subject line. Delilah problem. Should I read it aloud? Daniel's face went white. Don't. The wife is getting too curious. Asking questions about the Morrison funds. Might need to implement the Baker Protocol. Victoria looked up. For those unfamiliar, the Baker Protocol was their code for destroying someone financially and personally. They'd used it on 6 former partners who'd asked inconvenient questions. That's taken out of context. Daniel protested. Here's context, Victoria continued, clicking to another email. From father to Daniel. Agreed. Start moving assets offshore. File divorce papers November 1st. Make sure she gets nothing. If she fights, we have Dr. Kelman ready to testify about her instability. Dr. Kelman doesn't exist. Mara interjected. We checked. They were going to hire an actor to play a psychiatrist. The room erupted. Board members shouted over each other, some demanding lawyers, others trying to leave. I let the chaos build for a moment, then stood. Enough. The room quieted. Here's what happens now. The company undergoes complete restructuring. Every executive will be reviewed. Every deal will be audited. Every victim will be compensated. Those who cooperate fully might avoid prosecution. Those who don't. I gestured to Daniel. Well, you can share a cell block with the Whitmores. Gerald Morrison stood. I motioned to remove all Whitmore family members from any position within the company, effective immediately. Seconded, said Patricia Huang, the only female board member besides myself. All in favor? Every hand raised except Daniel's. Motion carries. Third item. Appointment of interim CEO. I nominate Delilah Cross, Patricia said. Seconded, Gerald added. She's not qualified. Daniel shouted. She's never run a company. She's just a woman who turned $50,000 into $50 million through strategic investments. Patricia interrupted. A woman who uncovered years of fraud your Harvard MBA missed? A woman who's already presented a restructuring plan that will save 800 jobs your incompetence threatened? That kind of unqualified. The vote was unanimous, minus Daniel's useless objection. Final item of old business, I said. There's someone who wants to address the board. The door opened, and Maria Rodriguez entered. Jason's mother. 5 feet tall, gray-haired, wearing her best dress. The room went silent. 17 years ago, she said, her voice steady despite tears on her cheeks, my son was killed by a drunk driver. That driver was Daniel Whitmore. Instead of calling an ambulance, the Whitmore family called their lawyer. My boy bled out on the side of the road while they worried about their reputation. She looked directly at Daniel. You were 19. Jason was 17. You got to grow up, get married, run a company. Jason got a grave. Daniel couldn't meet her eyes. I'm not here for pity, Maria continued. I'm here to tell you that your company, built on blood and lies, is being given a second chance my son never got. Ms. Cross has promised that Whitmore Industries will become something better, that it will help families instead of destroying them. I'm here to hold you all accountable to that promise. She placed a photo on the table, Jason in his basketball uniform, smiling. This is who you killed to protect a drunk boy's future. Look at him. All of you look at him. They did. Even Daniel finally looked. Ms. Cross has established the Jason Rodriguez Foundation with the sale proceeds from the Whitmore estate. It will provide legal aid to victims of vehicular violence, support to families destroyed by drunk drivers, and lobby for stricter penalties for those who flee accident scenes. Maria's voice grew stronger. My son's name will save lives. That's his revenge. Not destroying you, but becoming everything you're not. Helpful, meaningful, remembered for good. She walked out, leaving Jason's photo on the table. The silence that followed was deafening. Meeting adjourned, I said quietly. As security escorted Daniel out, he turned back one last time. This isn't over. Yes, I said simply, it is. 6 months later, the former Whitmore estate had been transformed into the Cross Foundation Center for Financial Justice. I stood in what had been Catherine's pristine sitting room, now a legal aid clinic where families facing foreclosure could get free help. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Through the window, I could see the grounds where Thomas had once hosted his power broker gatherings. Now it was a community garden, tended by families who'd lost their homes to predatory lending. The Hendersons had a plot where Catherine's rose garden used to be. The Nguyen's grew vegetables where the tennis court had stood. Ms. Cross. A young woman appeared in the doorway. Natalie, Miguel's daughter, now in her second year at Harvard Medical School. She volunteered here on weekends, helping families navigate medical debt. Victoria Whitmore is here. Victoria looked different. 6 months of running her own ethical consulting firm had replaced her brittle privilege with something more genuine. She'd cut her hair, traded designer suits for simple elegance, and, most surprisingly, smiled like she meant it. The quarterly reports, she said, handing me a folder. Whitmore Consulting has helped 40 small businesses restructure their debt. All ethically, all legally, all successfully. And, personally, I'm in therapy. Actual therapy, not the kind where you pay someone to agree with you. Turns out, growing up in that family left some scars. We walked through the center together, past the room where financial literacy classes were held, past the legal aid office where Miranda, Daniel's former secretary, now helped other harassment victims build cases. Have you heard from them? Victoria asked. Your mother sends letters. I don't open them. Your father's lawyer sends threats. Margaret files them under evidence of continued harassment. And Daniel is serving 5 to 7 in minimum security, Victoria finished. I know. He writes to me too. Still blaming everyone but himself. We stopped at the portrait wall, not of the Whitmores, but of the families they destroyed and who were now rebuilding. The Hendersons had reopened their hardware store. The Nguyen's restaurant was thriving. The Williams family had started a foundation for families dealing with childhood cancer. Do you ever regret it? Victoria asked. The total destruction? I regret that it was necessary, I said. I regret 5 years of my life spent with someone incapable of seeing me as human. But the destruction?
No.
Some things need to burn completely before something better can grow. My phone buzzed. Sarah Martinez, now working on a book about financial abuse in marriage. The Times Review is in, she said without preamble. Your story, our story, is being called essential reading for every woman who's been told she's not enough. The book's already in its third printing. And the proceeds? All going to the foundation as agreed. We've raised $8 million so far. After she hung up, Victoria and I walked to the center's main conference room. 20 women sat around the table, all survivors of financial abuse, all learning to rebuild. Today's session was on investment strategies. Ladies, I said, taking my place at the head of the table, the same chair Thomas had once occupied when this was his boardroom. Let's talk about compound interest. Not just in money, but in justice. How small actions, consistently taken, can topple empires. One woman raised her hand. My husband says I'm too stupid to understand the stock market. My ex-husband said the same thing. I replied. He's now in federal prison while I run his former company. Let's start with proving him wrong about you, too. That evening, I returned to my apartment, not the St. Regis suite, but a modest place in Brooklyn with a view of the bridge. My real home, purchased with my own money, in my own name. There was one last letter to write. Daniel, your mother asks if I forgive you. Your father demands I drop the civil suits. Your lawyers insist this was all a misunderstanding. Here's what I understand. You had every opportunity to see me as a partner, an equal, a human being with value beyond decoration.
You chose not to.
You taught me that power corrupts, that wealth insulates, that cruelty can be called tradition if enough people practice it. Those were valuable lessons, though not the ones you intended. You're serving 5 to 7 years. In that time, 800 families will receive free financial counseling through the foundation built with your family's money. 300 women will leave abusive marriages with full legal support. 1,000 children will receive scholarships that would have been your inheritance. Your family name, which you valued above everything, will become synonymous with fraud, cruelty, and downfall. My father's name, the strip mall accountant you mocked, will be on the building that teaches financial literacy to thousands. You asked if any of it was real. Here's the truth. I loved who I thought you were. But that person was my own projection, my hope that somewhere under the arrogance was a human being worth loving. I was wrong. This isn't forgiveness. It's closure. The woman you tried to diminish has become everything you feared, powerful, independent, and completely indifferent to your opinion.
Don't write again.
Delilah Cross, never really Whitmore. I sealed the letter, the last communication I would ever have with him. My phone rang. Chuck Morrison. The foundation's gala next week, he said. My daughter wants to know if she can speak. She has something to say about second chances. Of course. It's about rebuilding, not just revenge. Delilah, thank you for showing us who we really were, and for giving some of us the chance to become better. After the call, I stood at my window, watching the city lights. Somewhere out there, Thomas was in federal prison, learning that his name meant nothing to fellow inmates. Catherine was in that queen's apartment, learning to live without servants for the first time in her life. Daniel was in a cell, maybe finally understanding that degrading others doesn't elevate yourself. And somewhere else, the Hendersons were having dinner in their reopened store. The Nguyen's were celebrating their daughter's college acceptance. Maria Rodriguez was visiting Jason's grave with news that his foundation had just saved its 100th life. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. This is Amy Patterson. You don't know me, but I saw your story on the news. My husband controls all our money, tells me I'm too stupid to understand it, treats me like property. I'm scared to leave. Can you help? I typed back. Yes. You're not stupid. You're not property. And you're not alone. The Cross Foundation will help with everything, legal, financial, emotional. The first step is the hardest. You just took it. As I hit send, I thought about that birthday dinner. Daniel raising his glass, calling me his most successful failure. The room laughing. Me, sitting silent, the envelope hidden in my purse. He was wrong about one thing. I wasn't his failure or his success. I was my own creation. My father's daughter. My mother's strength. My own architect. And I had built something from the ashes of what they'd burned. Not just justice, but hope. Not just revenge, but renewal. The clock showed 11:47 p.m., exactly 1 year since that birthday toast. I poured myself a glass of wine. Good wine, that I'd chosen and paid for myself. Happy birthday, Delilah, I said to my reflection. Here's to the year you stopped being small. In the distance, the city hummed with life. Somewhere, another woman was being told she was nothing. Somewhere else, she was starting to suspect that was a lie. The Cross Foundation would be there when she was ready to prove it. The Whitmores had built an empire on the belief that some people mattered more than others. That empire was gone now, replaced by something built on a different belief, that everyone matters, that kindness is strength, that the smallest voice can topple the tallest tower if it speaks the truth. They'd given me a toast to failure. I'd given them a reckoning. And from the ashes of their empire, 1,000 phoenixes would rise. If someone you loved told the whole world you were nothing, would you prove them wrong quietly or make sure everyone heard the truth? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the price of underestimating the person sitting right across from you.